but the great teachers, the Mark Powers, even the Ben Glasses, everybody talks about that team, building that team. Sometimes we're afraid of losing, a member of the team because our lives are going to fall apart, but there's always somebody better to replace them with, and you have to work very hard at it.
You're listening to the Legal Mastermind Podcast with your hosts Ryan Klein and Chase Williams, the go-to podcast for learning from the experts in the legal community about effective ways to grow and manage your law firm.
Welcome to another episode of the Legal Mastermind Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Ryan Klein, and today in the studio we have Harlan Schillinger. He is the grandfather of legal advertising. Before anybody was out there doing legal advertising, this guy hit the streets. He invented television advertising in the legal community when no one was doing it. I was saying before our interview, Ryan, we're about to talk to the Don Draper madman. I think on your website, you call yourself the grandfather of legal advertising. So Harlan, welcome to the Legal Mastermind, and we're super excited to be speaking today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be part of your program.
I know I gave a brief background. Do you want to share with our guests a little bit more about how you got your start?
Well, in 1975, I was asked to join, or I had an opportunity to join a company that made syndicated television commercials. We invented syndicated commercials for retailers. At the time, we were doing the De Beers commercials, Noxzema, Take It All Off, Irish Spring. My partner at the time, Bill Meiskens, was the executive creative director of J. Walter Thompson, and he had a vision to get into this syndication of upper-end retail, the stuff that's not on sale, fine menswear, fine jewelry, fine furs and such. And we launched this little company, and we did very well with it. We were peddling commercials and gave a retailer an opportunity to get on the television with commercials that they can go back to back with a national advertisement, not take a back seat. And so we recognized the legal category in 1977, and without having any clients, we produced a series of television commercials. Pre-edited a section when you bring in the client's name. I think the briefcase opened and the card stuck in there. And we fanned out and peddled them. We took on quite a few clients, and it was amazing. And that's how I got into the business back in 78, 79, that year. And been doing it ever since. In 1984, I merged my business with a gentleman named Norton Fricke. Norton was the second lawyer ever to advertise on television. People were coming in and out of Colorado to see what he was doing. There was, on a ski trip and what have you. And so he was gaining ground. And my partners wanted to retire, actually, and I wanted to get involved with the airtime and, build a full-service agency. So I merged my business with Norton, and we took off. And I give my success a lot to Norton, who was a genius in ideas and such. Real crazy guy, but honest and wonderful. And let's see, a couple of years before I retired from my agency 4 years ago, I think we were in 96 markets with about 88 clients, which is a huge footprint. Along the way, we started a number of different things. I was one of the founders of National Tri Lawyers. And, I got involved in, a lot of other things, in the industry. I don't know where the grandfather came in. People said, you're the grandfather, the godfather. I don't think I'm any of that. I think I'm an old guy that can tell you what not to do more than what to do. But I did kick off this, this rage of advertising. And, if somebody wants to give me the, the positive accolade of being a grandfather, because I love grandfatherhood, I'll take it.
Thanks for the awesome intro. I know, just wanted to add, you're a guy that listens and fills the gaps. I know recently, before the interview today, we were talking about how you came up with the idea for Lead Docket, and that was really just you filling a gap. So I think today on the Mastermind podcast, we're going to be discussing how to fill those gaps specifically at your firm, and then in turn, filling those gaps could lead to an increase of business. I know on your website it says, filling gaps, you can lead to an increase of business of 20 to 30%. And I think that might be modest,
It is, depending on your business. And, when you said, well, what do you think we want to talk about? I said, well, what can we give value? What kind of value can we add to the, to the community? I'm a firm believer of giving more than you take. And I built a business on that and a reputation. And it's worked out pretty good for the people I give information to, and particularly for myself, opposed to, There are no real secrets. The secret is how you implement things. But a little trick in advertising that my first partner, Bill Meiskens was a legend. He did the many commercials and he pioneered television advertising. Bill taught me a couple of things. Number one, you get what you ask for in advertising. In advertising, you fill a gap. I'll use your word. You fill a gap. You figure out what people are not doing, and you do it. And that really stuck with me. When I got into this business when I was 25, and I'm in my 70s now, it really resonated. If you're in a conversation with people, it's always more important to listen than to talk. My wife tells me every day when I wake up, Harlan, be interested today, not interesting. We all have a tendency to want to hear ourselves. But in advertising, figure out what other people are not saying. Figure out what you want to say. Or you can be the sheep and follow what everybody else is doing, but that doesn't really separate you from everyone else. And so everything that I've done in my life, I've stuck to that principle. What aren't they doing? What don't I hear? For instance, when people say, wow, you know a lot, and I said, well, what I really know is what not to do, because you try things, you fail, and you go through, and you guys have done this many times. You got to try things, but really what experience tells you is not what to do, it's what not to do. And what I did learn, and you said, well, I think we're talking about the biggest hole in a law firm's bucket. And I said, well, it's intake and conversion. And, when I walked you through, what my philosophy is, you shook your head and you said, well, that makes a lot of sense. So it's really filling in what other people aren't doing. If somebody's not following up on leads, or they're not tracking leads, or they're not tracking their business metrics, the solution is to do it. And you'll see what the outcome is when you do things like that, because you discover what you don't know. I have the trademark, what you don't know, for a reason. And it's in the legal community, but it's simply common sense.
And I think this goes against what a lot of lawyers do. And it's just, you throw something up against the wall and hopefully it sticks, and you keep doing it because you're sort of treading water and you're making money, and you're building your business slowly, but there's so many gaps there. And it's, to your point, it's taking a step back. And I think the word you did use is filling a hole in your bucket.
Yes, I did, because I think there's a big hole well, there's no question that there's a major hole in lawyers' buckets. And I'm not going to move from that position. I put my money where my mouth is. And I've also taken that situation very seriously with law firms and increased their business 30, 40, 50, some of them double their business with money that you've already spent on advertising. A number of years ago, my clients came to me, and I love to use this example, and they said, well, give me more leads. And I said, well, what'd you do with the last ones? And they said, well, they weren't any good. Well, I said, I'm not so sure about that. So I took exception, to that, and I really dug into, what am I delivering? Am I delivering bad leads, or am I delivering leads that aren't being converted? But the single issue that lawyers, I'll point out to, lawyers count what they have, not what they don't have. You can be a marginal lawyer, which I don't really care for, and make a lot of money, because in this business of PI, personal injury, there's no ceiling on how much somebody can earn, how much they can make. They could hit a case, they can meet somebody in a bar and take on that case and land $1 million fee. That's not uncommon at all. And so I don't want to say an easy business to make money in, because I think there are good lawyers and bad lawyers, and good dentists, bad dentists, and so on. But the smart operators recognize that it is a business. It has to be run like a business. And you have to implement very strong business tactics, which is accountability, metrics, and so on. People say, well, give me another lawyer to look at. And I said, well, why will look at another lawyer? Look at a successful business to copy, not another lawyer. Lawyers, in spite of themselves, make money.
So talking about the whole process, we're talking about, you do marketing, you get the leads, you have an intake process, hopefully it converts. And then sometimes I think that a lot of PI attorneys just assume if they're going to contact, they're just going to sign up with you. Like you're the one person they're looking at, but that's certainly not the case in a lot of situations, especially some campaigns. They might talk to several depending on how quickly they get back. So what do you feel is like the point where a PI law firm is just like, we do have a problem with conversion? Are they doing any tracking where they see they have 100 leads and 20 signed up? At what point are they like, oh man, we have to address this much sooner than later?
Well, that's the aha moment. And the first thing is that almost every lawyer that I talk to, I don't know how they came up with this percentage, but they say, well, I get about 94% of everybody I want. And then you have to really drill down and say, okay, well, what do you mean what you want? Well, if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm sitting across the desk from them, I hand them my contingency fee agreement, I get 94% of the people that I want. All right, God bless you. I'm not going to fight you on that. What about the person that calls up and they said, I want to talk to you about my case, but let me get back to you because I want to talk to my husband or my wife. Or what about the person that is shopping that you don't know they're shopping? Unfortunately, lawyers have a built-in chip, and it's called the Arrogance Chip. And they see what's in front of them, and they don't see very often what they don't see, which is back to what you don't know, you don't know. But if you get 100 telephone calls and you write 20% or 30% of your business, because every single call is a lead, whether it's somebody coming from outer space or somebody coming from down the street, you're paying for that lead. You're paying for that phone call. And so my theory is, let's look at what you don't write. Let's look at the calls that you're getting, not the cases you're writing. You can measure the cases, but if you don't have the initial calls and you don't have the initial net, what are you measuring? And so to increase your business, you got to figure out what you're not doing. And that takes a lot of humbleness. And people don't make changes unless they're in pain. Lawyers are not going to change unless they are in pain. You could say, well, they'll change because they're hungry, but what prompts change is pain. And so lawyers start to really recognize their intake when they're saying, well, I'm not doing well enough, or why is my competitor doing better? You have to really step back and look at what you don't see. And that's where you make gain.
So I have a theoretical question for you based off of your previous comment about sort of going against the grain of what everybody else is doing and not being a sheep. So if you were a personal injury lawyer today, what do you think your marketing would look like?
Well, I have a strategy because I'm a strategist and I have, private clients. My theory, my backbone, and this has been my backbone since the beginning, is to talk to the public the way you would a jury. And the reason I say that is that you can't fool a jury, and you have to be real and you have to be credible. And the other backbone piece is that you have to be who you are. You have to be honest. You have to be who you are. I'm not into gimmick advertising. I'm not into cars blowing up. I'm not into, all the hocus pocus that people get to get your attention. You get what you ask for. You talk to the public the way you would a jury because you're going to tell them a story. And you're not asking the jury for $5, you're asking for $5 million. And you have to be who you are. And that is the backbone of my strategy and the strategy that I employ on the people that I work with. If you don't fit into that mode and that mentality, we're not a fit. But it makes a lot of sense. We've got the best jury system in the world. Talk to the public the way you would a jury. Lawyers don't think that way. They want to follow the other guy. They want to yell louder. They want to spend more money. But, it's kind of interesting. If you look at all the television commercials that are out there, all the advertising, and I've done this, a number of times in my life. I put, 800, 1,000, 1,500 commercials back to back, 2 seconds apart. And they all say, we'll get you this, we'll get you that, we'll do this, I'll do that, we'll fight this, we'll fight that. And they all sound the same. So the lawyer that I envision, that I work with, separates themselves. And you got to say, well, how do you do that? I told you how I do it. I talk to the public the way I would a jury.
Yeah, I completely agree with that because there isn't a single discovery call we've had for a new website with a lawyer where it's like, what do you envision for a website? Well, I like what this law firm does over here. I like what this law firm says over here. That's always seems to be how they go about kind of with the process to create the creative process. It's like, it's not exactly a creative process. It's like, how can I duplicate it and make it mine process? And it's not really.
That's very well said. I loved what you just said there because it's so descriptive.
Yeah, it's just like, why don't we take, approach where you take a step back, you don't look at anyone, and we talk about you, what differentiates you, what are your values, like what do you, perceive being your, process for assisting someone with a legal issue. So
let's step back a second and let's, you talk about, well, how do you envision, the lawyer that, if I was a lawyer, probably the biggest faux pas I made in my entire life was not getting a law degree. On the other hand, I've made, pretty good inroads in the legal industry and made my mark. And I've certainly, made some mega practices and built some mega practices in the country, but nothing. But let's step back for a second. what does your team look like? What does your practice look like? What does your law firm look like? What do you look like? The only way that I know to win as a law firm is to operate your business as you would a sports franchise. If you wanted to win a Super Bowl, and whether we like the Patriots or not, everybody on that team has a job. And they draft NFL, and let's not get into the politics of the NFL, but the structure of the NFL is you draft players to catch the ball or throw the ball or block so that we can run the ball over the line. And if you don't have a team set up and everybody in place and find the very best players on that team, you've got a real challenge in winning a championship, because drafting the right players, having everybody know what their job is, and having a process in place is what's going to win a Super Bowl or win any kind of a championship or win you the business of your dreams. That's my analogy. And, I like to come up with analogies. When we talk to a jury, we talk to the jury in analogies. The great storytellers, the Mark Lanier's, the Jerry Spence's, the Melvin Belli's, they relate a situation to somebody so that they say, yeah, I understand that. I get it. That's what an analogy is. And I think that's a darn good analogy for building a practice. Building a business is you've heard the comment, well, you judge by who you surround yourself with. Well, think about it. You surround yourselves, if you want the best practice or the best team in town, you better surround yourselves with the best players.
That's hard sometimes, because a lot of times.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Chase. I was just gonna say real quick, that's resonating with Chase and I a lot lately. But
No,
Yeah,
it's your business isn't any different than a law firm. We get stuck with marginal players. We get stuck with what we call the purple cow, or the entitled cow in the office. I mean, managing all of this is very, very difficult, and understanding it is very difficult. There are lots of self-help books, but there's very few that tell you exactly how to implement it. My friend Ken Hardison at Pilma, he has a phenomenal grasp on this concept, and that's what he teaches. But the great teachers, the Mark Powers, even the Ben Glasses, everybody talks about that team, building that team. Sometimes we're afraid of losing, a member of the team because our lives are going to fall apart. But there's always somebody better to replace them with, and you have to work very hard at it.
I think one of the things that you kind of struggle with, there's two things. One would be finding someone who, in your mind, that's just as good as you at the specific job. Like, hey, I could build this website or run this marketing campaign, and I know it 100%. And then at the same time, am I okay having it done at 90%?
Well, no, I'm not, and I take exception to your comment. It's a good comment, but let me tell you where I'm coming from. I don't want to hire somebody. I don't want anybody as good as me. I want somebody better.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be much better. You're surrounding yourselves with much smarter. I'm not a smart guy. My claim to fame is I surround myself with people much smarter than I, and that's a fact. And the smartest operators in the country, the biggest people, Bill Gates didn't hire people that weren't smarter than him. He had a great idea, but he wasn't the one that was sitting there building, the programs and building. I mean, he initially in his garage, I'm sure he did. The Steve Jobs, of the world, the entrepreneurs of the world, we're idea people, but we have to implement things. So you have to have people to implement them. And so you always find people that are smarter than you. A lot of people are afraid to hire somebody that's smarter than them because they have a ridiculous ego. Well, I mean, does Bill Belichick or Mike Shanahan or any of the great coaches that are out that have been in the game, how do they operate? It's interesting. Have you watched the Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary? Well,
Not
it's
yet.
a tremendous piece. But the thing that I enjoyed the most, I think it was in chapter 6 or 7, is when brought Phil Jackson into Chicago. Maybe it was episode 5, and it was all Michael. Everything was Michael. Get Michael the ball. Michael's got the ball. Everything. But the way they won their champion, they never won a championship until they changed their philosophy. And what they did was they drafted players to work with Michael. They gave Michael didn't do as much shooting. It didn't do as much boards. What he did was he orchestrated a team, and he got everybody and elevated everybody's level for teammanship. And they got into the triangle, methodology and, all of this. But what they did was they took the ball out of Michael's hands and they put motivation into Michael's hands, and he motivated everybody to step up. And that's how they won 4 championships in a row. and you run your practice that way. I keep going back to sports because sports is a great analogy.
I mean, it's an amazing analogy. I like the Patriots one, and I like this one. I'm sure that applies to like LeBron James too, with what they did.
Well, they certainly did that with LeBron James. I mean, you can't have one person. Brady, phenomenal quarterback. John Elway, I'm a Bronco fan. Always be a Bronco fan. Spent 42 years in Denver. They started winning because they drafted different players. They drafted somebody to catch the darn ball. So it's got to be a team effort. And that's how you build a practice. Getting back to the comment about, the biggest hole in your bucket. I know that kind of spurred your attention when I chose that topic. But there's a lot of holes in law firms' buckets. You got to humble down and take a look at what your business is. But the biggest thing that I see lawyers not doing is understanding and running their business by metrics. They don't look at the metrics. The metrics do not lie. Your gas gauge says on empty. It's not because there's gas in it. You have to follow the metrics and putting metrics in place, whether it's lead docket or whether it's, FileVine or whether, no matter what it is, you have to have those metrics in place. You can't run your practice on gut. You can't run it with folders, and you can't run it with, with sticky notes. You gotta have the metrics in place, and you have to have the processes in place for accountability. That's the overall biggest hole in people's buckets, truthfully.
Yeah. So that all being said, and leading up to this point, as far as accountability and then implementation and really knowing what's going on with metrics, if we get to a point with the law firm where they have, let's just say hypothetically, a successful intake process, it's a good one and it's working. The next step is some sort of CRM, just flat out. There has to be some sort of CRM as far as keeping track of the leads and making sure that they convert into clients.
Well, the most successful CRM, profit-wise and used more than any other CRM in the world is Salesforce. And Salesforce is an amazing product. It's very complicated to use, and it hasn't really grasped for a law practice because it's overcomplicated. But what it does is it gives you accountability, and it also allows you to market. I firmly believe, and this is when I built Lead Docket, we had a lawyer as a partner, we had a tech person that understood the technical aspect of it, and we had a marketing person, myself, that built a product. It is a marketing tool, customer relations marketing. It's a sales process. You can, say, well, we're not in sales, I'm in law, but yes, you're in sales. You have to sell the person to come into your law firm. And, with that, there's a process, and the process has a lot of different elements. For instance, if I speak to you, you call by, the law firm and you have a nice conversation, what should we do at that point? I mean, let's say we don't, what do we do? How do you sign somebody up? Do you use DocuSign? Do you send an investigator out? You do something in the process to initiate the result. But you should have a texting protocol in place simply to thank you for the telephone call. It's all about communication, and it's about building that relationship. And the fact of the matter is, in this day and age, you need to be tech-oriented. You need to have tools to be able to implement all of those things. And that's where the process and that's where the CRM comes into place. Can you imagine running your business, without a case management system? And almost everybody has a case management system. And so where we are with intake and conversion is not everybody has a CRM. Very few people actually have CRMs. I think there's 4,000 lawyers in the country on television, and there's about 400 units in place, between, the 3 or 4 people that do CRM. That's 10% of the population. What does 90% do? They follow it up on sticky notes. They follow it up on folders. They follow it up in their minds. They have sheets of paper. That's not the way you operate these days. You don't own a rotary phone.
Hopefully not.
You have a phone that has all your contacts in it. It's interesting. One of my other philosophies of business, and I'm very set on this, is you want to make it as easy as possible to do business with you. I mean, think about it. Most law firms, they really don't make it easy for people to do business with them. I'll give you, for instance, a simple question that you can ask in intake, and I insist on asking these questions, is tell me what's the best way, Chase, for me to communicate with you? What's your best way? How would you like me to communicate with you? I didn't say, this is how I communicate. I want you to communicate my way. I mean, that's the analogy, but that's how lawyers act. Well, give me your cell phone number and give me your website, your web address. Well, think about it. I'll bet you almost every single person that's listening to this says, "May I have your website number, your email address, and your phone number?" What you're doing is you're assuming you're going to communicate with them through that. Why would you assume that? I mean, this day and age, people are all over the place. I mean, you got an entire generation that don't return telephone calls. They want to text. But if I spent 5 minutes, 5 whole minutes, on how I'm going to communicate with you and what's the best way that we can communicate, can you imagine how smooth things go in the future? Can you imagine if that client or prospect is shopping you and you discuss how you want to communicate with them? Does that separate you from everybody else? This is all common sense. Law firms just simply don't do that. They rush on to the next phone call. Let me take the information down. Why is it important for me to ask how you're feeling? That only takes up time in the conversation. What do I care? Well, it's all about compassion. This is part of intake and CRM devices, platforms, like Lead Docket, which I'm very married to, but there are others, that they force you to do those kind of things. They force you to make it easy for people to do business with you. And that's what a CRM does.
That's a great point. I mean, especially with contact forms too, because some people like filling out contact forms. I think it's happening less and less, but people still do. And then it's kind of up to the discretion of, whoever is in charge of doing the follow-up. They see phone number, they see email, maybe some will just email and they didn't even say that there's a preferred way of doing it. Next person might call. There's not really any indication of the best way to get in contact with them.
Well, we're guessing, and we're assuming they're going to do it our way. But if back in my college days when we were in the bar with all the guys and the girls were at the bar, and I wanted to come up with something, I got to come up with a unique line, or I can sound like everybody else. But if I really want to date somebody, I got to find out what's the best way to call them. I mean, and what you're showing is sincerity. Let's be selfish for a minute. What you're doing is you're finding a way how to do business and how to connect. Is there a lawyer that's listening that every time he gets information from a client, the client responds immediately? No. I mean, clients, they're not great communicators. Lawyers are worse. So we're spending a lot of time on culture and how to separate yourselves in common sense. It's kind of interesting. I've been asked on almost every podcast I've been in, what do you think the biggest takeaway from this COVID-19 situation is? What's going to change law firms? And everybody says, well, technology. We're doing more Zoom conferences. We're doing more FaceTime. I guarantee you this, that most people that say, well, I'm going to do more Zoom conferences, don't. They're going to go right back to the way they do business. But if you think about what came out of this is I'm looking, Ryan, at you, and I'm looking at you, Chase, and I'm having a conversation. I feel like I'm in a relationship. We could have done this without looking at each other. But I'm picking up your body language. I'm seeing your eyes. I'm seeing what you're thinking about. I'm seeing you drink water. I'm in the room with you. I'm present. So now let's take this theory and let's bring it to our practice. Let's make it mandatory to have conference calls with our clients. Well, let's make it a goal that I'm going to do it with Zoom. I'm going to do it with, I'm going to do it with FaceTime. How easy is FaceTime? I mean, I do it with my granddaughter who's 5. It's a mindset. But what's going to separate you from everybody else? And that's doing business. So I'm passing on my philosophy, my strategy, what I say to my clients to make them money. And I haven't said anything that's original or that's anything other than common sense.
I think going against what you just brought to our attention would be almost considered being lazy.
Well, you become lazy or you make money easy. It depends on what your hunger is and what your drive is. I'm sitting here and I got a client that says, I want to be the big guy in town. I want to double my business. You got to have an honest conversation. Say, what are you going to do? You're going to throw more money at it? In this day and age, is that really going to double your business? The chances are it's not. You got to spend a certain amount of money, but it's the marketing. It's what separates you. It's the culture in your firm. I mean, quite frankly, the best case, and you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that's booked more media than I have, over 42 years. But the truth of it is, and I have a television user and digital user, but the truth of it is the best case that walks into your office is through referral. So what do? I mean, people aren't going to come to you because they think they got a good settlement. They're going to come to you because of the way that you made them feel. When you die, nobody cares about how much money you have. You're going to be judged by how you treated people. And that's a whole marketing, task. There's a reason that people don't like lawyers. And it's because of their arrogance, their communication, or their lack of communication, or their inaccessibility. So if you want to really build a firm, go to the Ritz-Carlton School of Customer Service, and you'll empower your people to make decisions. You'll make your clients feel like $1 million, and that's how you build a business. But there's so few people that will follow it through because they're lazy, or everything gets in the way, or business gets in the way, or whatever it is. I mean, look at how many things we say we're going to do and we don't do.
Yeah, it's hard making these things a priority when there's like maybe a known priority would be like, actually, right now I just need to focus on getting more phone calls. And it's like, that's a priority versus these things we've spoken about. Or it's, I need to hire a new associate, or I need to upgrade my office or get things back to normal. And there's just so many things that you might be prioritizing in your mind that necessarily shouldn't be a priority, when these smaller things that are easy but are harder to really stick to aren't a priority.
Well, it's logic. I mean, if you sit back and you say, okay, Chase and Ryan, give me more telephone calls. Okay, well, have you thought about how you're going to answer that call, or what you're going to do, and how you're going to handle your intake, and what's your process for people for following up on people? I'll go back to the biggest hole in the bucket. Within that big hole, within that process, in intake and conversion, the biggest opportunity to make gain is in what we call the chase. Not chase that's on the telephone, but the chase, which means you're chasing after the lead, you're chasing after the contract, you're chasing after. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was with a very dear friend of mine in New York, his biggest asbestos firm. I won't use the name, biggest asbestos firm in the world, and he's so proud. And I had to go there on behalf of a gentleman I was working for, Glenn Lerner, and I had to decide who's going to answer the telephone. In a litigation, I think it was a baby powder litigation, Johnson & Johnson litigation. So I traveled to New York to look at his intake, and he was so proud of his intake. And he turned around to, I spent time on the second floor. Nobody goes to the second floor. Why would we want to go down to the second floor, where Gladys is, or whatever the young the lady's name is. But I spent time there, and then I took him down there, and he said, well, Gladys, how many packets did we send out this week? Well, we sent out 32. How many did we get back? 2. Well, what are we doing with the rest of them? Well, they're going to be sending them back. Well, how many times, and this is me chiming in, how many times are you going to call them for that packet? Well, we don't do that. We only call 3 times. Well, after a while, we went back to the 6th floor conference room, and my friend wanted to throw his intake person out the window, because I said, I'm answering my phone. I know you're paying for the advertising, but I'm not going to, he says, well, you're insulting me. I said, no, I'm not. I'm protecting my money. I don't like your process. And I didn't say it quite with so much arrogance, but, we walked through, and we just, wound up answering the phone and, teaching him a thing or two. Now, these people make substantial money, billions of dollars. Seriously, they're billionaires. So just because you're making a lot of money doesn't mean that you're doing it all right. It's finding out where the hole is. Had an interesting situation. I'll tell you a little war story. My dear friend Glenn Lerner hired me, and we went into Chicago, and he's taking in about 180 cases a month. And he had Captora, which is a great CRM, but he wasn't using it. And he had 7, 8 people in the field, and they had to fill out the paper and bring the paper into Vanessa, who typed it into Captora. And then every day at 3 o'clock, everybody turned their vehicles towards downtown, and I guess intake kind of stopped at 3 o'clock. So the first thing I did was change the process. I put tablets in everybody's hands. I made them use DocuSign. They were still out in the field. In 45 days, we upped the exact same expenditure to 300 cases. Now that's real money. Then Glenn cut the media budget by $100,000 a month. That's even real money. More real money. And now he hovers around 500 cases a month, but he changed the process and was humble enough to do it.
When I worked in-house for a PI firm, and we were doing Xarelto, and we were getting about 150 cases, 150 leads a month. And then about 20 were getting packets, and about 2 were getting back. I kind of wish I knew more about these processes and things that could have been done or implemented to definitely convert far more than those.
My dear friend Howard Nations. Howard is in his 80s. He's one of the finest lawyers in the world. He's a tremendous mentor. He's one of the smartest businessmen, greatest lawyers I know. Woke up one morning and said, you know something, I think I'm going to go in the office on Saturday morning and I think I'm going to call these people that aren't sending me back packets. Well, he got 60, 70 packets back and so on. And he said, I'm taking this in-house. I'm not going to rely on anybody to chase my money, to chase my packets, to my money, and change this whole process. He's the guy in his 80s that said, I'm a businessman. This is not logical.
On a Saturday, too.
Well, it took him, he went in on a Saturday because it was quiet, he can think. And, he brought his A-team in and said, we're going to change some things right now. By golly, he did. And I've learned so much from Howard Nations. And I can give you story after story after story. The biggest waste of time is in mass torts. I mean, they throw up an ad. You can't even read the email. You can't even read the number. You have no place to go. I mean, advertising, you fill a void. I mean, that's where let's get back to our original conversation. You fill a void. If you're in a relationship, you meet somebody and they never fell in love before, you fill that void and you show them love. And that's how you roll. That's how you gain business. That's how you grow business. You provide something that somebody else isn't.
Covered a lot of ground. It's been a fantastic conversation. I love learning more about your background, and all the stories, all the rumors are true after all. You truly
I'll give you one more hint. In advertising, I watch people, in advertising, they're selling ads. I never once sold an ad. I never sold a television commercial or media buy. I sold the concept of making the phone ring. I happen to use television as a vehicle. And, we had the largest agency in the business, bar none, and we pioneered a business. So you can figure out I'm not a smart guy. What I do is pay attention, and I look around and I listen, and I listen to what people aren't saying. So that's my tip of the day. Surround yourselves with very smart people, but get metrics in place. I was adamant about, building, my lead docket, program, and we built it out of necessity, for Dino Colombo's business. And I said, we should market this thing, and became a, phenomenal hit because it was easy to use. And it doubled people's business, added a minimum of 30%, finding out what you didn't know. So that's, back to the, to the title of the biggest hole in the bucket.
Awesome. And I know you're pretty selective with who you decide to work with, Harlan, but if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, I have a web page, harlanschillinger.com, and just Google me. I really don't take on a lot of business. I'm working with 6 to 7, maybe 8 clients right now, and that's very, very boutique, and you have to be, of the same mindset. I'm really a strategist. I try to keep my clients out of trouble. I help them with vendors. You'd have to ask them what I do for them. But it's been a fantastic ride, and obviously I love what I do. I love working with gentlemen like yourselves who are young and energetic and smart, and are growing up in the business. I think my calling is to pass on, what we know and what we don't know, so that we bring in a better world and a better advertising community.
Thanks so much. That was awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm honored that you wanted to pick my brain, and I really appreciate it. I know you do good work for your clients. Bill Umansky has got a thriving practice, and you're the SEO company behind it. So I'll give you a little bit of a plug. People should talk to you. You guys are hungry. You do what you say you're going to do, and you're just nice people.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Harlan.
Thanks for listening to the Legal Mastermind podcast. If you're interested in working with Ryan and Chase, please email mastermind@marketmymarket.com. Make sure to join the free mastermind group for growing and managing your firm at lawfirmmastermind.com. Ryan Klein and Chase Williams are the managing partners at Market My Market, one of the top legal marketing companies in the United States.